talking about kingdom leadership, I trust the Holy Spirit has been speaking in your heart and working in your heart to the degree that I've shared the word of truth. And what is not of him may fall to the ground and die. And what is of him, may that word penetrate and transform in the deepest recesses of your heart. And I want to just read the text to you in John chapter 13. I'll read the text and then make some comments. It was just before the Passover feast, and Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now, this one day, he now showed them the full extent of his love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray Jesus. And Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his authority. The word power, there's actually exousia, authority. And that he had come from God and that he was returning to God. So therefore, he got up from the meal and took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that, he poured out the water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that he had wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," Peter said, "you shall never wash my feet." Dear old Peter. Not that any of us are remotely like him. Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part of me." That's really important. "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "don't just wash my feet, but my hands, my head, everything." Not that any of us are remotely like that. And Jesus answered, "A person who has had a bath needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him. And that was why he had said, not everyone was clean. So when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes again, his outer garments, and returned to his place and said, "Do you understand what I've just done for you? You call me rabbi or teacher and Kyrios or master Lord. Rightly so, for that is who I am. Now that I, your Lord and your teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. For I've set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. And I tell you the truth, that no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him." And again, this is apostolic, apostello, the one who sent. "Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." We build our house on the rock of not only hearing the word, but doing the word. Doing church, doing healing, doing reconciliation, doing spirituality. It's in the doing that the transformation happens. Blessed are you if you do this way of leading, this way of leadership. So John's gospel, normally in the 6 talks on kingdom leadership, and I squashed some into at least cover 4 of them, or 3 of them, but in the synoptic gospels, studying the leadership of Jesus, which I alluded to in Mark's and Matthew's gospel. Then I go to John's gospel and do a talk on John's gospel. In John's gospel, there are 2 talks because John clearly champions 2 Old Testament symbols or metaphors that were common in the Old Testament for the leaders of Israel. That is shepherd and servant. And if you study the Old Testament, the leaders of Israel consistently, whether they were judges, prophets, kings, officials, were called servants. Servants of Yahweh to serve Israel. And deeply ingrained in the Jewish mind from the Hebrew revelation was that leadership is servanthood. But equally equivalent to is shepherd. And it's the shepherd of Israel and the servant of Yahweh. Leaders are shepherds of God's people, just as God is my shepherd. The Lord Yahweh is my shepherd. And he provides everything I need. I have no more needs. And the whole of Psalm 23 is about God's shepherding of David, who was called to be the shepherd of Israel as Israel's king. So servant and shepherd. So John chapter 10 is about the shepherd. Jesus stands up and says, I am the
Good shepherd.
The Tov in Hebrew, the good shepherd. In contrast to, and he's very overtly recalling and echoing Ezekiel chapter 34, where God has a whole tirade through Ezekiel of all the false shepherds of Israel that led to Israel's exile because of their constant misleading Israel into idolatry. They were the false shepherds. And if you read John chapter 10 and do a study on Jesus's understanding of kingdom leadership in the metaphor of the shepherd of God's people, you will see he's directly being political. He's addressing the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees and all the then current shepherds of Israel, whom he called false shepherds. So John chapter 10 verse 10, that the thief comes to rob, kill, and destroy. I've come to give you life. He's not teaching about the devil. He's teaching about false leaders, false shepherds. Behind them is the devil. But false shepherds, false pastors, false leaders who use and abuse God's sheep. And if you read Ezekiel chapter 34, there's a list of 7 charges that God has against the shepherds of Israel, who basically use and abuse God's people for their own purposes, their own ego, their own well-being, as opposed to truly laying down their life as shepherds for God's people, for their life and their well-being, to give them the fullness of life. And so that is a talk on its own, which is well worth studying. Then John chapter 13 is John's basically illustration of servant leadership. And he picked up the servant metaphor in the Old Testament. And just to say that this text for me has been incredibly meaningful and definitive for me in my journey as a leader. And Ryan would remember at Glenridge years ago when you invited me, part of what I shared. But how this came about, and this brief outline of thoughts that came to me through this text was in 1993. So 1993, I had October 1993, I traveled with a colleague, Kirk Slow, to the Vineyard Annual Pastors Conference down at Montague at the Hot Springs. And we left on the Thursday night after the last meeting, because normally we leave on the Friday morning and travel back to Joburg all the way from Montague in the Cape. But Kirk and I wanted to get home to our families, and Jill was at home with little Zander and small Misha, whatever. He was 3 or 4 and Misha was 2. And Kirk Slow fell asleep at the wheel at about 12:30, driving through the Karoo between Richmond and Virginia, these long straight roads. And what happened is that he fell asleep. I was in the passenger seat with the safety belt on, but I had my seat reclined because I was like dozing. And I suddenly heard the sound of the tar change in my semi-wakeful, sleeping. And I opened my eyes and I saw we had crossed the gravel, and there was a massive cement culvert, and the car went straight into the cement culvert. And I instinctively pushed my legs into the floorboards to brace myself. And we hit this thing, and there was a Pantechnicon truck. What happened is a big truck was on the road, and Kirk overtook the truck. But as Kirk overtook the truck, the road turned like that, and that's when he fell asleep. And instead of turning with the road, he just went straight. And all this happened in the headlights of the truck. Was the truck driver stopped the truck immediately. He witnessed the whole thing. He said, I saw it in the headlights. The car hit the cement culvert, cartwheeled through the air, and we cleared a 6-foot farmer's fence and bounced in the veld. And I was pulled out by the G-forces out through the back window. And he said he saw a body going through the air with the car. When I came around, I was unconscious for a while. When I came around, I felt something here. And I put my hands, it was all slimy, and it was the door, it was the car. And the car was on top of me from here down. I was sticking out of the car here, and Kirk was running around the field saying, Bushy, where are you? Bushy. So he was in the safety belt kept him safe. He had burn marks here, but he had nothing wrong with it, basically. And the car was concertinaed, so he couldn't open the door. All the windows were shattered. He had to climb out through the window, and he's running around the veld looking for me because I wasn't next to me in the seat. I was underneath the car. I'd shattered my hip here. I'd broken, this leg was broken in 2 places, all the glass shards, because the driver said he thought I came out through the back window and cartwheeled with the car through the air and ended up under the car. That was a near-death experience, and I won't go into it any further, but I had 6 weeks in hospital recovery after 2 operations, one there, one here, and it was a difficult time. But there was a precious elderly woman in Trevor Hudson's church, in the Methodist Church, Kempton Park, and I was a good friend of Trevor Hudson, and I used to do ministry. He used to invite me there. She came and visited me in Joburg Gen Hospital after my operation. I had an operation in Bloemfontein first, where they took me, and I was there overnight or 2 nights, and then they came back to Joburg. I had a second operation to reconstruct the hip here. But she came and she said to me, my art form, God's given me a gift, and my art form is stained glass windows. And she asked me a simple question: what is your life symbol? And I'd never been asked that question in my life before. What is your life symbol? And instinctively, without a second thought or hesitation, I said, Jesus washing the disciples' feet. That's my life symbol. And I never really seriously pre-thought that, but it was like in me instinctively. And she said, because I'd like to do a stained glass window of that symbol for you. Do you have a window? And it so happened in our study on the farm where we lived for whatever, 23, 24 years, in my study, I had a round window. I always wanted to have a round window above my desk. So she took the dimensions of it and she made the stained glass window of Jesus washing Peter's feet. Wow. And it was there all the years. And when I got home from hospital, I looked at the stained glass window and I thought, I better read John chapter 13. But as I read John 13, this just unfolded to me in a way I'd never seen it before, in terms of servant leadership. And just, again, looking, and in the mornings the sun used to rise outside, and in the mornings my study was filled with all the multicolored picture of Jesus washing the feet. So just to introduce it in that way, to say that for me this is deeply personal, and to maybe throw in a little personal further story which borders, Ryan, you know me well by now, on a little bit of wrong self-indulgence. But Trinity College, the Assemblies of God Bible School in America awarded me an honorary doctorate through long-standing colleagues of mine, Paul and Carol Alexander, who were in the Assemblies of God ministry as a young. Paul and I exactly the same age. In fact, we're only 1 month apart in our birthdays. I'm in January, he's in February, and he's president of the college there. But they wanted to award me an honorary doctorate. And equally, when I went there and they awarded me the doctorate, I did the Herman G. Johnson honorary lecture. They awarded me the doctorate, and then I had to do this honorary lecture, and it's got a whole history. I mean, it's really all the pomp and ceremony, and the head dudes were there in the previous lectures, and it was like quite a thing. And Paul said to me, he whispered, when he sent me stuff, he said, when you do the honorary lecture, just think about what is closest to your heart and what is the deepest, meaningful part of your journey with Jesus, and teach on that. And I had no doubt, John 13. And I taught it there, and so for me, this for me is part of, I think, what God has used to define me. So John here brings his understanding of Jesus' leadership from shepherd to servanthood. And this is the king who humbles himself to serve from the bottom up as a slave. And the simple story is that if you harmonize John's account of that meal together with Luke, Matthew, and Mark, the synoptic gospels, there are technicalities involved, and it's not easy because it says it's before the Passover. Maybe it was a Chabura feast on the Wednesday night, not the Passover feast on the Thursday night when he was crucified on the Friday, etc., etc. But I'm not going to go into those technicalities, simply to say this, that when they organized, he sent his disciples to organize to prepare for the feast, as Dylan and the youth were sent to prepare the breaking of bread this morning. And saying only you and I know. It's redefined me as part of the young people, because secretly they didn't arrive. I set it up. So I'm a young person. But they sent the disciples ahead to prepare the room. And you know what? They set it all up, but they forgot one of the most common arrangements in any Jewish home in the Middle East. And that was that when your guests come, and this is an important feast, this is the annual Passover feast, that when your guests come and they sit down, then the household slave or servant, so doulos, servant, it is slave, diakonos, servant, were used interchangeably of the slave stroke servant in the home who did all the basic common stuff that was owned by the master of the home. He was owned as a slave. To have a slave or servant on hand to do the common courtesy of welcome, of washing feet. But there they came and they all sat down, and then halfway through the meal, Jesus does his act of servanthood. But the build-up to it is really important. And as I went through the text back there in 1993, 1994, just looking at this wonderful symbol, it unfolded to me step by step into 7 characteristics of servant leadership. The king who serves and models kingdom leadership for all of us through all the generations of church history. And in so doing, as I go through these 7 characteristics, just bear in mind once again, these are not techniques on how to lead. These are characteristics of spirituality of leadership. This is the spiritual formation of leadership. If you use anything as a technique for outcomes, you get into push and pull, means and ends. And it doesn't form you, it uses you for its own ends.
Yeah.
You know that technology is not neutral. It forms us in its own image if we don't engage with it ethically and critically and use it for good. So these are not techniques for leadership. Don't listen to this as techniques. These are character traits of the spirituality of servant leadership. And as we go through them, it starts like this. It was just before the Passover meal, and Jesus knew that the time had come. So the first thing in servant leadership, because this is John's kind of teaching on Jesus' servant leadership, the first thing in servant leadership is that servant leadership, servants, they know the timing of things, and they know and discern the timing of God. We lead by knowing the timing. As I was praying for you last night. You know, John does this in a sense, deliberately, because in John chapter 2, the first miracle that Jesus did at Cana, the wedding, it was only the servants who had inside knowledge of what was going on, and no one else. When they said the wine's run out, and they went to Mary, and Mary came to Jesus, and he said to the servants, you see those 6 jars, and they were huge jars, full of them. And 6 jars of water, they work out the volumes, and you can read it. It makes 750 bottles of wine. You think that Jesus did anything, extravagant? There it is. They really enjoyed the big wine. It is the spirit of the thing. They had more than enough. Mielas Rubicon. So, but only the servants knew when Jesus said to the servants, now take that water to the master of the feast. And the master of the feast poured it out, and it became the best wine they'd ever tasted. And he actually said, how did this happen? Where did this come from? The servants knew.
Yeah.
The servants look at the master and wait for the master and move with the master in what the master's doing. And Jesus is, again, I use this word, but maybe I shouldn't. His life mantra, his life symbol, his life principle was, although I am the Son of God, I do nothing on my own initiative.
That's right.
Only what I see my Father doing, that's what I do.
Good.
And so Jesus moved and lived as a servant by the Father's initiative in the Father's timing in all things. And he could read the signs of the times, and he knew the time for what, and he knew the time to do this, the time to do that. And that is because of this posture of waiting on your knees as a servant on your master for his initiative and timing and directive in what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And it's the most remarkable thing to me that when I did it in 93, 94, a study on the servant, and I went back to the Old Testament and looked at the servant leadership. I mean, Isaiah's 4 servant songs of the coming Messiah are absolutely brilliant. I remember preaching at Following Jesus, a whole series on the 4 servant songs of Isaiah. But going back even further, it just blows my mind how that Israel, in her developing theology, took one of the most painful, oppressive histories of enslavement as slaves for 400 years under the pharaohs, building the pyramids as forced labor. And slavery was an institution of incredible oppression and pain for the Jewish people. And God comes and delivers them out of slavery into the Exodus, into the kingdom of God, where God becomes the king. And yet Israel spiritualizes slavery and turns it into a leadership metaphor. And so much so that in the Mosaic law, when they came out of 400 years of slavery, and God gave the law to Moses, and you read Exodus and Deuteronomy where Moses lays out the law, he says, in the people of God, the chosen people of God, where God is king and rules over us, slaves, Hebrew slaves, will only be kept for 6 years and not lifelong slaves. On the 7th year, they must be set free. You've heard about it. But there's a little provision in the law, and if my memory serves me correctly, I think it's Exodus chapter 21, this law of the slavery on slaves. There's a little intussen hakkies, if we gooi in a bit of Afrikaans there, where it says that if the slave says after 6 years, Master, I've served you for 6 years, and I've so enjoyed coming to obey you. I've done a long obedience in the same direction. I've learned to say, Master, not my will, your will be done. And I found the joy of obedience. And I've fallen in love with you, your family, this home, and this actually is my family. Please don't send me away. I want to become your love slave. Bond servant is the word love slave, which is a slave for life out of willing commitment to serve for the rest of your life without any obligation. And then what would happen is the master would take the slave, and if the master accepts it, would take the slave and would put his ear up against the door, the wooden doorpost, and would put an awl and put a hole. You know that in Israel, body piercing was verboten.
Yeah.
They weren't German, but they used that word. Because of the Canaanite tribes, with all the body piercings and the body tattoos and the marks and everything, Israel had a theology of the human body as the image of God that was sacred. You mustn't pierce it, you mustn't add to it, you mustn't take from it, because God will resurrect it. And so body piercing in Israel was not accepted. Anyone who had a hole in the earlobe was known in society as a love slave. It stood out. And you know, David in Psalm 40 under the Holy Spirit speaks inspirationally and says, "It is written of me in the book, I have come to do your will, O God." He's speaking of the Son of David, the Messiah. And then he says, "My ear you have pierced."
Yeah.
And he says, "Sacrifice and offerings you didn't want. What you sought for was obedience. I have come to do your will." I've said from eternity to eternity, which was incarnated in real human flesh, "Father, not my will, but your will be done." And Jesus in Isaiah chapter 50, the third servant song, says, "Morning by morning," is prophetic of the Messiah as the servant of Yahweh. "Morning by morning, he awakens me. He opens my ear to listen as one being discipled." And the word "open my ear" is he's pierced my ear to listen. Proverbs chapter 8, Solomon speaks of wisdom and personifies wisdom as with God, through whom God created the world. But you come to the end of Proverbs chapter 8, it's remarkable. And wisdom says, "Blessed, blessed, blessed is the one who listens to me." And then it says, "Blessed is the one." And it's Solomon's direct reference to the institution of slavery and servant leadership as the love slave. "Blessed is the one who comes daily and kneels at my doorpost." This is wisdom speaking. "And kneels at my doorpost, waiting for my instruction." Because in Israel, all the slaves, household servants, would come every morning and kneel at the doorpost and say, "Master, this is a new morning, a new day. I'm waiting upon you for your initiative in all things. I'm here to serve. It's my joy to do your will today. What must I do today?" Every day is a new day. And from moment to moment, I will only do what you ask me to do. That's a love slave. And there are references in the Old Testament of the servant leadership that actually converts into love slaves for life, because you learn to obey so deeply and so truly that it becomes the joy of your life, which actually is the love of your life. And this is all behind here. Jesus knew the timing of things, because morning by morning he woke early for prayer. And morning by morning he looked to the Father and said, "My Father, what are you doing today? I want to do it with you. What do you have for me today? I only do what I see you doing." Servant leadership knows the timing of things and moves with God in what God is doing, and does not take things into their own hands and do your own initiative. You only live by the initiative of your Master. Eternity. He knew that the time had come for him to leave the world and go to the Father. Jesus led as a servant in the light of eternity. He knew that he was deeply accountable to God as Father, and that he would leave and stand before his Father and account for his life and servanthood. And people, if you don't have an eternal vision, I know the timing of things. No, I know, that's why I'm talking about the timing of things. My darling,
But it's good,
my darling, relax. I know Ryan well enough to know that if the time's running out, he would, you can endure it.
Yeah, no,
But I'm talking from my
Jim.
heart.
I know.
So that's a little husband-wife tip. And I won that one.
No, the time is not finished. The time is not finished.
I only won this year. It's only one of you. Otherwise, she wins all of it. But friends, hear me, my sisters and my brothers, hear me. If you are not leading in the light of eternity,
That's right.
then you're an opportunist to do things now and get done. But if you're leading in the deep consciousness of the light of eternity, then you will appear before the judgment seat of Christ.
Absolutely.
And you will be held accountable for how you built, with wood, hay, or stubble, or with gold, silver, and precious stones. Because the head of the church will hold every leader and call you to account in eternity for how you led your people here in this age.
That's right.
And Jesus led in the light of eternity, knowing he would return to his Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. Jesus led by love.
Yeah.
Servant leadership is a matter of suffering love, because you suffer what the brokenness, the agenda, the pain, the stuff, whatever of the people that you serve. And you absorb it into yourself in love for their healing and transformation.
It's true.
Jesus lived and led by suffering love. He suffered the mindset of his followers. He suffered the pain of the world. And leading by love is serving people in every engagement, discerning what is their highest good, and doing for them what is best for them. Love is the will to do good. Love is seeking or promoting the highest interests of the other. Love celebrates the uniqueness of you as the image of God and does not use you in any way for your own agenda.
That's right.
Lust is the opposite of love. Lust uses people either through fantasy or through engagement or in any and every way. We use people to satisfy something in ourselves. When I use you for my purposes, for my pleasure, then I'm lusting, I'm not loving. When you lead by love, people discern and sense and feel loved,
It's good.
and it results in deep, profound motivation to submit to you and work with you for the common good.
Amen.
Because it's motivation from inside out. It's not imposed from outside in,
That's right.
through coercion and control, through top-down authority. Leading by love is the opposite to leading by lust. Many pastors
Come on, Eric.
use their people to achieve their own vision.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's leading by lust. That's use and abuse.
That's ambition.
Even the way we engage in ministry, it's interesting. You must forgive me. My little naughty eyes wonder and look around. But you know, even in ministry engagement, we engage in love, with honoring the person with great dignity and deep respect, and seeking their highest good.
That's brilliant.
Or we engage in ways that want to make something happen. You know,
Yeah.
the way we lead reveals what's behind it. And love is deeply sensitive, deeply honoring, deeply dignified. Lust has a way of engagement that wants something to happen, that has outcomes, that wants to use, that wants to engineer, that wants to make stuff happening here, to satisfy something deep inside ourselves, that, hey, God's doing things. God's using me. Even that is wrong.
Yeah.
If God uses me, it's God's business. It's none of my business. My only business is I'm here to do your will. It is written of me, I've come to do your will. You've pierced my ears, not my will, your will be done. What are you doing, Father? I want to do it with you. And just bless you. Every small engagement is a matter of love or lust. Then it says he loved them, at least the evening meal. And by the way, of course, when it says he loved them, but he now showed them the full extent of his love, is in fact what Greg read to us from Zechariah. In one day, he will cleanse the sins of Israel. The full extent of his love would be his betrayal, his agony in Gethsemane, his false trial, and his incredibly, excruciatingly painful crucifixion. And that would be the full extent of the love of God. You know that Jürgen Moltmann, the German theologian, the Lutheran, when I did my academic studies in the 70s, one of the textbooks in systematic theology, that was Adria Koenig, he prescribed The Crucified God by Jürgen Moltmann, and it's his theology of the crucifixion. The title itself is that God in Christ was crucified.
Yeah.
And the ultimate expression and symbol of God's love is Jesus hanging on the cross.
It's true.
And he explains what that means, the theology of the cross. And the embodiment of the eternal love of God from eternity to eternity, incarnated in the Christ, reached its climax and its full shining glory is the cross of Jesus in the greatest, deepest agony for humankind, absorbing all human sin, violence, and hatred into his body.
That's right.
That is the embodiment of loving to the very end.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And then it says the evening meal was being served. And it's interesting. The devil had put into Judas's heart already that he must betray Jesus. And just to know that when I read that phrase, I remember thinking back of that all the years of leadership, I've always encountered the opposition of evil that opposes you in different ways, and sometimes often through your closest others. And just know that last night when we were ministering with the wounds of leadership, we will, if you lead the Jesus way, believe you me, the devil will target you. And you'll become his project, as in screw tape letters. They will scheme and connive, these demons, to work against you because God's working through you. And sadly, tragically, painfully, often it's our closest colleagues that inflict the greatest pain. You know, the greatest pain I went through in life was a divorce back in 1984. Some of you don't know that I have been divorced. But that was unbelievable pain. But in leadership, I've been through the pain that has come close to that of closest other colleagues that we've had to part ways in very painful and difficult ways. And then it says that Jesus knew the Father had put all things under his authority, and that he had come from God, was returning to God. So this is a comment that Jesus knew his authority in God and the borders and limits of his authority, and he operated in his authority. You know that it's interesting when the James and John said, we have a request, can we sit at your right hand and left hand in your kingdom? And Jesus said, you don't know what you're asking. Your mindset of leadership is to have position and power and title. That's not the way of the kingdom, it's the way of servanthood. But then he says, but then he makes a comment, but to give that, to sit at my right hand and my left hand in the kingdom, is not mine to give, it's only my Father's to give. And I don't know who it will be. Jesus knew the limits of his authority. There are examples in the New Testament where Jesus knew his authority and the limits. I mean, of that day and hour when the Son of Man returns, not even I, the Son, know. It's in the Father's authority. And you need to know your authority, lead in your authority, and not overstep your authority.
Sure.
And then it says, so therefore, because he knew his authority, he knew the opposition, he was loving to the end in the light of eternity, and he knew it was time. He got up and took off his clothes and went to the door and got the basin, poured the water in, and actually behaved like the slave, whom they had forgotten to arrange because of the preoccupation of a discussion as to who was the greatest among them. If you harmonize this story with the Gospels, when they went to prepare for the upper meal and they went in there, they had a discussion among the apostles because Jesus said, now the kingdom's going to come. And they said, oh, am I going to be the minister of finance? Probably Judas. And Peter was saying, am I going to be the prime minister? And they were again already jockeying in their mindset. Leadership is power, people. Leadership is control. Leadership is rule the roost. Leadership is position. And all of that. In that context, they had forgotten a slave. To do the most common courtesy in any Jewish home, that when you welcome people by washing their feet. And Jesus gets up and behaves like a slave to their utter and stunned embarrassment. They were stunned into silence. They thought Jesus was humiliating himself as their senior pastor, behaving like the one who cleans toilets. And his humiliation of himself to become naked and vulnerable was their humiliation. You know what servant leadership looks like? And I often do this in different contexts. I did this recently in America at the Vineyard Regional Pastor Conference. I taught this and I had my little trick. I had my running shorts and my t-shirt on. So I took off my clothes. And you can see the eyes. Some of the guys were even trying But once I dressed down to my running shorts and t-shirt, then I walked my way up to the door and I arranged beforehand with a basin and pitcher of water and a towel wrapped over, and everyone's just like, now they're silent. I've abandoned the platform. And I've gone there and I pour the water in and I tuck the towel in and I come and then I wash her feet or two and then I kneel down and I say, this is the image of kingdom leadership, is the servants coming naked without any gimmicks up your sleeve, without any push or pull or tricks or personality or charisma or any of that stuff that's associated with charismaniac leadership, all the celebrity leadership we live with. None of that drama, all of that props and stuff. It's nauseating. You come naked, stripped naked. You lay aside, although he was equal with God, he did not hold on to it. Neither did he use it for his advantage, but he kenosis. He let go and stripped himself of privilege and power and majesty and humbled himself to become born of a woman, a young 14, 15-year-old Mary, virgin, vulnerable baby, rejected in the back room, sleeping in a manger with the animals. Jesus, God in Jesus, comes naked and vulnerable with no gimmicks, not relying on personality, not relying even on charisma, only relying totally with purified faith on the authority that God gives, to serve and to wash feet. That is what kingdom leadership looks like. It's naked, vulnerable, honest, real, true servanthood, where you wash and serve people from the bottom up. And once he had done that, of course, we heard Peter's little story. Peter said, well then, if that's the case, then wash everything, because I really need to be included here. And that's what I said. Oh Lord, I want to be fully in. He ends up saying, look guys, I've set you an example. This is how you should live your lives. This is how you should lead, is wash people's feet. And of course, he didn't mean it literally, go around and wash people's feet, although it's good to do that when the Holy Spirit prompts it. But it is the outpoured life of love that cleanses people and enfolds them into the kingdom. Jesus' outpoured life of love washes his disciples and enfolds them into belonging and participation in the kingdom of servanthood, which is